You were born in Bradford, and your mum's English and your dad's Coatbridge. Is that correct?
That's right, Coatbridge, yeah.
Yeah. So, when were you born?
When was I born?
Aye.
May 15th, 1952.
Yeah. You're only a boy. I'm 1943. So
43, just a couple of years.
Aye, absolutely. But you grew up in Bradford, I understand, and but you taught yourself initially. What took you to? Why did you want to learn bagpipes when you're down in Bradford?
Well, the story is, my mother played. My mother was real, believe it or not, a good banjo player. And she could sing, and it turned out my father from Coatbridge, you know how some people like bagpipes and some people really don't?
Yes.
And he was a don't.
Oh, well.
He did not like the pipes. And there was an advert in the newspaper for pipers and drummers wanted for the local band, which was called the Paisley Mansfield Pipe Band, that eventually changed the name to the City of Bradford. And she says, "You're going to learn to play the bagpipes." I says, and I was, I think 11 maybe, or 12. And I said, "No, I might play drums." So I went up, my dad took me up, and I said, "I want to be a drummer." And they said, "Well, we don't have any drumsticks. We have a practice chanter and a Logan's tutor book. Take these, play around with it, and come back in 6 or 7 weeks, and we should have some drumsticks." I said, "All right." So I took the book home and played around with it, and 6 or 7 weeks later, "Oh, we don't have any drumsticks yet, they haven't shown up. How are you getting on with the book?" So I played it, and long story short, I never did get any drumsticks, and that's how I sort of learned, from the book. And then just watching the guys in it was probably a grade 5 band. But you just watching them how they play, and that was what I kind of did. My first bagpipe that they gave me a tenor drone. It was a complete bagpipe with one reed in, one tenor drone reed. Go home and blow that till you can blow it steady. Well, after 3 or 4 days, I was really fed up blowing this one reed, so I went to the local music store like an idiot and asked, "Do you have any bagpipe reeds?" And of course he opened the drawer, and here are these dried up things, you know, that have been in there for years. He said, "Oh, we can sell you them." So of course I put them in, and nothing really worked. And eventually got some decent reeds, but I could never get the bass drone to work. It would never work. So I was at the band practice one day, sitting there, and I noticed the pipe major tuned the top section of somebody's drone. And I thought, I've never seen that before. I'll have to check mine. So when I got home, I went to check it, and the top was jammed right down. And it was glued down. So I pull it, and here it had been broken off, and they just glued the top to the mid. And I didn't know any better until I saw him actually physically tune it, you know. So I played for a little while with the 2 drones, and by now I was enjoying playing. Occasionally you'd speak to one of the guys in the band and say, "Am I playing this right?" You know, and they say, "Yeah, it's all right." Okay. And then next week you'd go and try something else. And I remember playing the first tune I learned was the Earl of Mansfield. You know,
that's quite a lovely tune.
Yeah,
it's quite tricky in a way too, you know.
3 parts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I couldn't pick a 2-part or a 4-part. I picked 3, which always struck me as odd. I think it might have been the first tune in the Logan's book, and that's really all I did for instruction. And then I played in the band, and the pipe major was from Scotland, and his brother. John Gilchrist, and he was an okay player, and I would watch him, you know, closely, and that's how I learned, watching and see what they did, and then I'd go home and try and do the same thing, you know.
Who's Bill Bamford?
Bill Bamford was just, he was the drum major of the band.
Right.
And he looked like a true Scots bagpipe player.
Right.
He looked the part. He was a good-looking guy, and he carried himself, and he'd have the proper gear, and he'd play slow tunes, and people thought he was absolutely marvellous. He couldn't play 2 grace notes to save his life, but he looked good, and people liked it because he played tunes they knew.
So what was your first sort of formal creation, proper creation?
And the bagpipe.
Oh, that would be after I'd gone to Scotland and I'd just joined Shots. That would be, oh my gosh, 1974, 1975.
But you must have, did you teach yourself up to first grade standard?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Aye.
Pretty much.
That's
That's
amazing.
I played with Lanarkshire Police for a little while.
Aye,
My first band.
I'm totally amazed by that, that you managed to do that. Did you obviously paid a lot of attention when you were listening and observing others and all the rest of it?
Oh yeah.
Aye. Did you listen to a lot of recordings or what, John?
You mentioned about how I learned tunes at the beginning. It was, I'm not really sure how it came about, other than purely by accident. Back then, when I'd be, I don't know, 13, 14, I think it'd be, maybe, I had a little record player, and I had managed to find 3 albums. One was Muirhead and Sons, one was Invergordon Distillery, and I think the last one was a Shots one. It might have been Edinburgh Police, I can't remember. There was 3 of them. I remember Muirhead's, and the one that fascinated me the most was Invergordon, because they played everything differently to everybody else. Faster and sort of more lively, and they had the pibroch on the end, which was great. So I used to go to bed, maybe read a book and listen to one of the albums, and then I don't exactly know what I was doing in particular, but I finally, I would put these 3 albums on the old record player. They're all 33 RPM, big vinyl records, and I had a pair of headphones, and I would put the headphones on and fall asleep listening to these things. And each one would play the one side, and then it'd switch off sometime during the night. And I did it for, jeepers, 3 or 4 nights, and play the other sides and listen to that and listen. And all of a sudden, tunes were coming to mind as I was, usually as I was on my way to school. I had about maybe 30-minute walk to school, and it was more of a march to school as opposed to a walk, because I would be humming these tunes and marching along in my head to these tunes. And I found all these tunes were becoming easy to play because I had them memorized. But I didn't sit down and memorize them. They kind of just formed in my head while I was asleep, which was absolutely fantastic as far as I could think. I did that, I probably did that for 2 or 3 years. Listened to various albums and pipe bands and what have you. And the tunes just stick when you're asleep. Your subconscious, I guess, picks them up, and you find you suddenly realize they'll come to mind from nowhere, and you pretty much know the tune, and then you just have to start putting the grace notes to it. Make sure you got the right grace notes, which also seem to fall into place. So I guess learning tunes at the beginning there was quite easy. the first tune I learned from the Logan's tutor book was the Earl of Mansfield. Why I picked a 3-party tune, I never know. But anyway, so that's how I learned them at the beginning. I've never really worked on it since, but I've no doubt it would work, because I think your brain does it never goes to sleep, does it? It goes into different phases, and that's how I learned them. That was that.
Ever record yourself when you were learning, just to play back and see what you were doing and all that sort of stuff?
No, never.
So that's quite an amazing ability, just to have picked everything up. So you come up to Scotland, and Lanarkshire Police Pipe Band, was that the first band you went to?